Okay, let's unpack this. When you think of Pac-Man, you probably picture the arcade, right? That iconic yellow circle chomping through a neon maze. For many of us, it's a foundational memory of digital entertainment, a global icon that has transcended generations for over 4 decades. You might think of it as just a simple game, maybe a relic of the past. But what if I told you that behind those simple pixels, there's not just a single story, but an entire universe, actually, a multiverse of lore waiting to be discovered? This isn't just about a character. It's really about how a character can truly transcend its medium and evolve in ways you might never ever expect.
What's truly fascinating here is how something so inherently minimalist in its origin, born from a simple gameplay loop, could possibly spawn such a diverse and often contradictory narrative tapestry. You're absolutely right. It's less about a single linear story that builds neatly upon itself, and much more a series of distinct universes, each valid in its own right, each reflecting the specific era it emerged from. Each new iteration of Pac-Man, whether it's a game, a cartoon, or, well, even a legal document sometimes, reflects not just the game design trends of its time, but also the broader creative and commercial drivers that shape popular culture. This deep dives isn't just about the mechanics of how Pac-Man plays. It's a journey into how a simple concept can evolve into something far more complex, adapting to new platforms, new audiences, and even unexpected real-world influences over time.
Absolutely. So our mission today is to guide you through this incredible kind of winding journey. We're going to trace the chronological evolution of Pac-Man's lore, treating each major iteration as a separate but equally significant universe. We'll start with the foundational era, where the story was literally coded into the game. Then we'll dive into the Pac-Land and adventure canons, where Pac-Man found his voice and, well, his epic destiny. We'll analyze the dramatic shifts of the reboot canon, which completely flipped the script. And finally, look at the modern and meta lore, where things get wild because the real world starts writing the fictional one. We're going to uncover how the seemingly simple act of eating transformed into a hero's destiny, how even the ghosts changed sides, and how corporate decisions can actually rewrite established history. This deep dive, by the way, is based on a comprehensive report titled The Pac-Man Lore, a multiverse of mazes, and it draws extensively from the official history chronicled in the remarkable book Pac-Man Birth of an Icon, which includes insights from over 40 new interviews with key figures behind the franchise.
Okay, great starting point. So let's embark on our journey at the very beginning with the foundational era, the arcade genesis spanning from 1980 to 1983. During this initial period, the primordial lore of the Pac-Man universe wasn't conveyed through elaborate cutscenes or grand narratives or character backstories in the way we understand them today. No, it was fundamentally coded in algorithms. The narrative here is remarkably minimalist, derived entirely from the gameplay itself, the cabinet artwork that first greeted players in arcades, and, crucially, the stated intentions of its visionary creator. This era is absolutely crucial because it established the core grammar of the Pac-Man universe: the eternal chase, the concept of temporary power reversal, and the distinct, albeit, subtle, personalities of the antagonists. These bedrock concepts would become the indelible foundation upon which all subsequent more elaborate canons would be built. The game's rules were the lore.
It's quite profound to think that the very first chapter of this saga was literally embedded in the code rather than written on a page. And the birth of this icon, Pac-Man himself, was driven by some really thoughtful and, frankly, revolutionary objectives for its time. Toru Iwatani, the Namco designer, began developing the game in 1979, originally calling it Pac-Man in Japan. His vision was a direct response to the arcade scene of the late 70s, which was heavily dominated by violent war games and countless clones of Space Invaders.
Right, that was the landscape.
Exactly. Iwatani's goal was revolutionary. He deliberately set out to design a non-violent game, specifically to broaden the arcade demographic. He famously observed arcades as dark, noisy, and, well, mostly male-dominated spaces. And he aimed to create an experience that would feel welcoming, appealing specifically to women and couples, thereby making these venues more inclusive and socially vibrant. He wanted to change the very atmosphere of arcades.
And this ambition for broader appeal fundamentally informed his core design philosophy, which centered on the universal and inherently approachable theme of eating, or tabaru in Japanese. Pac-Man's iconic circular shape itself, so deceptively simple, has a fascinating dual origin. Iwatani famously recounted how it was inspired by the sight of a pizza with a single slice removed, immediately suggesting an open mouth.
Ah, the pizza store.
Yeah. It is, but it also drew inspiration from a simplified, rounded version of the Japanese kanji character for mouth, which is kuchi. So it's this blend of everyday relatable objects and deeper cultural symbolism. The character's signature yellow color wasn't a random aesthetic choice either. It was chosen for its perceived neutrality and peacefulness, described by Iwatani as a neutral color which neither represents friend or foe. In this initial lore, the fundamental action is established. Pac-Man, this unique creature, exists within an abstract maze, his singular purpose being to consume all the dots in his path while being relentlessly pursued by antagonists. This simple premise establishes the franchise's foundational predator-prey dynamic, a concept so elemental yet endlessly engaging that it became the core loop of his character's identity.
So yeah, this wasn't just about making a fun game. It was a conscious social statement designed to transform arcades and broaden their appeal beyond just typical gamers. And the shape. A pizza slice and a character for mouth that's truly remarkable how those everyday inspirations and cultural symbols merged to create something so enduring. Now, if we talked about the core cosmology of this early era, it's entirely defined by the maze, the pack dots, and the power pellets. The maze itself isn't just a level, it's an abstract, enclosed cosmos, typically outlined in neon blue against a black void. It fundamentally defines the boundaries of this primordial conflict, the contained universe where this primal endless chase unfolds a miniature world that would eventually, explode into a full-fledged multiverse. And the pack dots, those seemingly simple objectives, are actually the very purpose of Pac-Man's being in this early universe. They define his existence as a consumer, setting a primal rhythm that becomes the core loop of his character's identity.
Exactly. And then we have the power pellet, often referred to as an energizer, which introduces the first truly significant element of lore beyond simple consumption. Positioned strategically in the four corners of the maze, these larger flashing dots introduce a crucial narrative concept: the temporary reversal of power. Iwatani himself stated that the idea for the power pellet was directly inspired by the classic cartoon character Popeye the Sailor.
Popeye. Spinach.
Precisely. Who famously gains superhuman strength and invincibility after consuming a can of spinach. The parallel is clear and intentional. Upon consuming a power pellet, Pac-Man undergoes a temporary transformation. He becomes empowered, and his ghostly pursuers, who moments before were relentless hunters, turn blue and flee in terror. For a brief, exhilarating period, the hunted becomes the hunter, establishing a fundamental theme of temporary, almost godlike power that would become a staple of the franchise's identity. It's a brilliant moment of strategic reversal that flips the entire dynamic, not just for gameplay, but for the inherent narrative of power.
And what about those iconic antagonists, the ghostly quartet, Blinky, Pinky, Inky, and Clyde? They are, without a doubt, as famous as Pac-Man himself. Isn't that true? Iwatani's team wanted to inject tension and a sense of threat, but still keep it appealing to that broader audience he envisioned. So they meticulously designed these enemies to be cute and non-threatening, with bright pastel colors and large, expressive eyes that could convey emotion. Their design was actually inspired by friendly ghost characters from popular media of the time, like the television series Casper the Friendly Ghost and the beloved manga Obeki no Kyutaro.
Yeah, those were big influences.
And Iwatani even famously had to successfully argue against his superior's initial desire for all the ghosts to be a uniform red. He insisted on distinct colors for each ghost, not just for gameplay clarity, but crucially for characterization, believing it would make them feel more like individuals.
And this wasn't just an aesthetic choice. It was a stroke of genius that fundamentally shaped the early lore. Crucially, the ghosts were not a monolithic enemy force. Each was programmed with a unique artificial intelligence or personality, creating complex and dynamic chase patterns that felt surprisingly organic. This was, in fact, the first instance of explicit character differentiation in the Pac-Man universe, with each ghost's name and behavior hinting at its specific strategic approach. Let's break them down. First, Blinky, the red ghost, was nicknamed Shadow, or oikake in Japanese, meaning chaser. He is the most aggressive and relentless, giving direct pursuit to Pac-Man. He's often the first one on your tail.
Okay, the main chaser.
Then there's Pinky, the pink ghost, nicknamed Speedy, or Makibus, which translates to ambusher. Her primary strategy isn't direct chase, but rather trying to position herself in front of Pac-Man, cutting off his escape routes and attempting to corner him. Next is Inky, the cyan ghost, nicknamed bashful, or kimagur, meaning fickle or moody, his movements are the most complex and, frankly, unpredictable. He positions himself relative to both Pac-Man and Blinky, often creating these flanking and pincer maneuvers that really surprise players.
Ah, the tricky one.
Definitely. And finally, Clyde, the orange ghost, nicknamed Pokey or Otoboke, meaning stupid or perhaps feigning ignorance. He alternates between chasing Pac-Man for a short distance and then retreating back towards his home corner of the maze, making his behavior seem random, almost lackadaisical, and often frustratingly unpredictable.
So he just kind of wanders off sometimes?
Essentially, yeah. The genius here is profound, how the very code defining their movements becomes the first chapter of their story. This isn't just enemy AI, it's character design through programming, creating distinct personalities and challenges without a single line of dialogue or narrative exposition. It raises an important question for us. How much narrative, how much character can truly be embedded purely through mechanics? This foundational era tells us that sometimes the most foundational storytelling is baked directly into the mechanics and the creator's subtle intentions. The game's rules are the lore.
That's a truly profound point. It really makes you think about how early game developers laid foundational storytelling without a single line of dialogue. It also highlights how revolutionary that was for the time. Players weren't just reacting to obstacles, they were reacting to what felt like distinct adversaries. But wasn't there a risk that making them cute would undermine the tension? How did Iwatani balance that?
That's an excellent question. Iwatani was very deliberate about that. He understood that while the chase needed to be tense, a completely terrifying enemy might deter the broader, non-violent audience he was trying to attract. The cute aesthetic, paired with their distinct but, logical once you learn them patterns, created this unique blend of approachability and challenge. The cuteness invited players in, but the clever AI provided the genuine threat and engagement. The player learned to fear their patterns, not necessarily their appearance, which is a subtle but really powerful distinction. It showed that menace doesn't always have to look menacing. It can be derived purely from behavior.
That's a fantastic insight. Makes perfect sense. Now, the next huge development, the introduction of the first family. Mrs. Pac-Man and the Pac family didn't actually start with Namco in Japan, did it? It originated kind of unexpectedly in the United States. The 1982 arcade game, Mrs. Pac-Man, was developed by an American company called General Computer Corporation, or GCC. It began as an unauthorized enhancement kit for the original Pac-Man, creatively named Crazy Otto.
Crazy Otto, right.
Yeah. Due to some prior legal entanglements with Atari, GCC was compelled to present their work to Midway, who was the North American distributor of Pac-Man at the time. Midway saw its potential, purchased the project, and brilliantly rebranded it as an official sequel, turning Crazy Otto into Ms. Pac-Man. This separate non-Namco origin is incredibly significant because it's the genesis of a creative divergence that would define the franchise for decades and, as we'll see later, eventually lead to some very real and impactful meta-lore legal disputes. It's a key example of how external factors really shaped the lore from early on.
Indeed, Mrs. Pac-Man was a landmark character, not just for the franchise, but for the entire industry. She introduced one of the very first female protagonists in a major arcade game. Visually, she was distinguished from her male counterpart by iconic feminine traits: a red bow, a playful beauty mark, vibrant lipstick, and delicate eyelashes. But more importantly for the lore, the game's intermissions, those charming little cutscenes between levels, established the first explicit romantic narrative in the series. These short, animated sequences depicted Mrs. Pac-Man and Pac-Man meeting, falling in love, engaging in playful chases, and finally having a baby delivered to them by a stork. This was a completely new layer of narrative.
A whole family dynamic appearing.
Exactly. And to further solidify this family-friendly image, the character's name was notably changed from the initially proposed Miss Pac-Man to Miss Pac-Man. This seemingly small detail was a conscious decision to avoid any implication that she had a child out of wedlock, reflecting the social sensibilities and, moral standards of the time, even within the context of arcade games. It speaks volumes about the cultural anxieties of the early 80s being imprinted on a video game character.
Here's where the lore really branches off early, isn't it? The entire concept of Pac-Man having a family, a love story, a personal life that came from America, not Japan. And the reason for Emsers versus Miss. It's a fascinating glimpse into the social sensibilities and cultural norms of the time, influencing even the naming conventions in arcade games. It's kind of wild. This family concept was further solidified by subsequent American-developed arcade games like the pinball video game hybrid Baby Pac-Man in 1982 and the scrolling maze game Junior Pac-Man in 1983. These titles not only introduced their offspring as playable characters, but firmly established a multi-generational, character-focused dynamic that stood in direct contrast to Namco's own development path back in Japan.
Which brings us squarely to the early evolutions, spearheaded by Namco itself, specifically with Super Pac-Man, released in 1982. While Midway was busy building the Pac family narrative and expanding on the romantic angle in America, Namco released its own official sequel in Japan, with Toru Iwatani returning as the lead designer. Interestingly, Super Pac-Man largely ignored the family-centric developments coming from the West. Its focus was squarely on evolving the core gameplay mechanics and introducing new strategic layers. The objective shifted from simply clearing a maze of dots to eating keys that unlock doors, behind which were various food items, creating a new kind of puzzle element.
So this game introduced a new kind of power-up then, didn't it? Beyond just the standard power pellets. How did that particular evolution contribute to the growing lore of transformations, rather than just being a gameplay tweak?
That's a fantastic point to highlight because it wasn't just a new mechanic, it was a fundamental step in establishing a tiered power system within the Pac-Man universe. Most significantly for the lore, Super Pac-Man introduced a new, more powerful transformation. In addition to the standard power pellets, 2 super pellets were available on each level. Consuming one of these transformed Pac-Man into a much larger, visibly more powerful, faster, and temporarily invincible Super Pac-Man, capable of breaking through locked doors without needing a key.
Oh, Super Pac-Man.
Exactly. This established a second tier of power within the universe, a concept of escalating transformations that would be heavily expanded upon in later eras, laying the groundwork for many of the fantastical power-ups we'd see in future games and cartoons. This divergence between the American narrative focus on family and the Japanese gameplay focus on new mechanics and transformations created 2 truly parallel creative streams right from the franchise's inception. This foundational split explains many of the canonical inconsistencies and diverse paths that would follow later on.
That sets the stage beautifully for our next monumental shift. From these early coded beginnings, where lore was purely abstract and then branched into 2 different veins, the Pac-Man universe took a truly monumental leap, not in the arcade, but on television screens. This brings us into what we call the Pac-Land canon, which is essentially the Hanna-Barbera universe, running from 1982 to 1984. This was a huge game changer. The 1982 animated series, produced by the legendary Hanna-Barbera, was a true pioneer. It was the very first cartoon ever based on a video game. Its creators were tasked with building a tangible world and a coherent narrative from the highly abstract concepts of the arcade game. This adaptation fundamentally transformed Pac-Man from an amoral eater into a classic heroic protector, an archetype that would define his characterization for the next 2 decades and deeply influence future games.
This was a monumental leap indeed, taking a silent, abstract character, literally a mouth on screen, and giving him a voice, a family, and a suburban home. It immediately anchored him in a relatable, episodic narrative, which was an absolute necessity for successful television back then. Premiering on the ABC network in September 1982, the Pac-Man cartoon gave it silent, pixelated characters, voices, distinct personalities, and an actual social structure for the very first time. Pac-Man himself, voiced by Marty Ingalls, was portrayed as a cheerful, brave, and slightly goofy family man. In this specific canon, his wife, Mrs. Pac-Man, was given the more personal first name Pepper, voiced by Barbara Minkus.
Pepper? I didn't know that.
Yeah, Pepper. Together, they had a child, Pac-Baby, and even 2 pets. A loyal dog named Chomp Chomp, and a mischievous cat named Sourpuss. This wasn't just expanding the family. This solidified the Pac family concept, which had begun in the American arcade games, and firmly gave it a concrete suburban-style context, making them a typical, wholesome cartoon family of the era.
And crucially, it gave them a place to live. The abstract, 2-dimensional maze of the arcade was reimagined as Pac-Land, a vibrant, 3-dimensional world characterized by spherical geography, whimsical architecture, and even objects like trees and cars that were all around. Very distinct look. This was the first time the Pac-Man universe was given a proper name and a consistent physical form, truly driven by the commercial imperative to create a setting that could sustain episodic storytelling for television. To this end, the writers cleverly recontextualized the power pellets. No longer just abstract items in a pixelated maze, they became a vital natural resource, the primary source of food and energy for all of Pac-Land, growing miraculously on trees in the sacred power pellet forest.
That's a key invention.
Right. This invention didn't just add a visual element, it created the series' central conflict. Pac-Man's role was elevated from a simple dot muncher to that of Pac-Land's official security chief, tasked with protecting this crucial resource from his enemies. This narrative shift provided him with a clear, heroic motivation that was conspicuously absent from the arcade games. He became a hero by duty, not just by, eating dots.
And the ghostly antagonists also underwent a significant transformation in the show. They were given a much more defined structure and hierarchy. The core four, Blinky, Pinky, Inky, and Clyde, were now collectively known as the Ghost Monsters. They were characterized as bumbling, often comedic minions with distinct voices and personalities, a far cry from their silent, algorithm-driven arcade counterparts.
Right. Classic Hanna-Barbera henchmen.
Well, pretty much. They were even joined by a fifth ghost, Sue, a purple ghost with prominent earrings, adapted from the orange ghost of the same name that had appeared in the Mrs. Pac-Man arcade game. Crucially, the ghost monsters were no longer independent agents driven solely by their AI. They now worked for a new, human-like, cloaked mastermind named Mesmerin. Mesmerin's sole motivation was clear: to locate the Power Pellet Forest and seize control of Pac-Land's entire energy supply. This established a clear villainous hierarchy and consistent narrative purpose for the ghost's otherwise seemingly random attacks in the game. The act of being chomped was also concretely defined. A ghost's bite would drain a Pac person's energy, while Pac-Man, after eating a power pellet, could destroy the ghost's physical forms, leaving only their disembodied eyes to retreat back to their lair to acquire a new ghostly outfit for their next attack.
Ah, so that's where the returning eyes came from.
Exactly. It provided a concrete in-universe explanation for the game mechanic of ghosts regenerating.
This was a big turning point, wasn't it? The cartoon didn't just adapt the game, it profoundly changed the game and the character's perception. This Hanna-Barbera universe had a direct and profound impact on the video games that followed, marking the very first time a non-gaming adaptation shaped the direction of the core franchise. Look at the 1984 arcade game, also called Pac-Land. It was explicitly designed to mimic the aesthetic and world of the cartoon. It completely abandoned the traditional top-down maze format, becoming the series' first side-scrolling platformer.
A huge shift in gameplay.
Totally. The game's version of Pac-Man mirrored his cartoon counterpart, complete with arms, legs, a fedora, and expressive facial features, a far cry from his original circular form. The plot, which involves Pac-Man returning a lost fairy to Fairyland, clearly echoed the episodic, quest-based nature of the show, a shift from simple, high-score chasing. Can you imagine an abstract character suddenly needing arms and legs because of his TV show? It's a powerful feedback loop where adaptation reshapes the source material.
And this influence continued for quite a while, demonstrating the lasting power of this animated canon. A decade later, Pac-Man 2, The New Adventures, released in 1994 for home consoles like the SNES and Genesis, continued to draw heavily from the Pac-Land canon's whimsical, character-driven tone. It featured a unique gameplay style where the player doesn't directly control Pac-Man, but rather influences his actions and moods using a slingshot, almost like an observer guiding a cartoon character through their day. Very unusual mechanic.
Yeah, I remember that game being a different...
It was definitely different. The plot, involving a new antagonist called the Ghost Witch of Nader, who was essentially a clear stand-in for Mesmeron, stealing gum from children, further solidified the cartoon's whimsical and character-driven tone within the gaming universe. This really cemented Pac-Man as a character with a defined personality, a suburban home, and a family, a concept that had started in the American arcade titles and fully blossomed in the animated series. So the key takeaway from the Pac-Land era is this. When a beloved game character leaps to another medium, that adaptation doesn't just borrow from the original. It often fundamentally reshapes it, creating its own distinct canon that can even feed back into the games themselves. It's a powerful and often surprising feedback loop.
That's a fantastic point, truly illustrating how media cross-pollination can alter the very DNA of a character. So, from the whimsical cartoon-influenced world of Pac-Land, we now enter a period of truly epic expansion. The adventure canon, specifically the Pac-Man World saga, running from 1999 to 2006. This period marks Pac-Man's successful transition into 3D platforming, a common trend for iconic characters at the time. But more importantly, it represents the most significant and detailed expansion of his classic lore. This series really built upon the heroic protector archetype established by the Hanna-Barbera cartoon, but it retroactively created a deep history for Pac-Land itself, introduced new dimensions, and developed truly complex villains with grander schemes. The narrative progression across the three games mirrors that of classic epic adventure stories, escalating from a personal quest to a battle against ancient evil and finally to a reality-threatening dimensional crisis.
If the cartoon gave Pac-Man a relatable world, the Pac-Man World saga gave it a history, a complex mythology, and epic stakes that resonated with a new generation of gamers. This is where the aha moments of genuine world building truly kick in for the franchise. The saga begins with a very personal crisis in Pac-Man World 1999. On the day of Pac-Man's 20th birthday, a seemingly innocent celebration takes a dark turn. His entire family and friends, including Miss Pac-Man, Junior Pac-Man, Baby Pac, Professor Pac, his dog Chomp Chomp, and even the Puka character from Dig Dug, are suddenly kidnapped by the ghosts and taken to their newly established homeland, Ghost Island.
Kidnapped on his birthday. Harsh.
Right. The plot then follows Pac-Man's heroic quest to rescue his loved ones by journeying through 6 distinct themed areas of the island. A pirate ship, ancient ruins, a space station, a wacky funhouse, a bustling factory, and a spooky mansion. Classic platformer structure. The true mastermind behind the kidnapping is revealed to be Talkman, a giant robotic doppelganger of Pac-Man, introducing the theme of technological mockery and a twisted reflection of the hero. His name, Talkman, is also a clever inversion of Namcot, the brand name formerly used by Namco for its home console game division, adding a subtle layer of meta-commentary for astute players.
Talkman. Namcot.
Yeah, clever. Yeah, it's a nice touch. By establishing Ghost Island as a concrete physical location with diverse themed worlds and structuring the game around a clear rescue mission, Pac-Man World greatly expanded the scope and geography of the universe while explicitly linking itself back to its arcade origins through 3D maze bonus levels, allowing players to briefly return to that classic gameplay loop.
This is truly like Pac-Man getting his own Lord of the Rings. Suddenly there's not just a maze, but an ancient war, magical artifacts, and legendary heroes in the backstory. It gives so much more weight to Pac-Man's simple origins, transforming him from a simple consumer into a hero by destiny. This deepening of lore continued dramatically with Pac-Man World 2, 2002. The plot is set in motion by a seemingly minor act of mischief. The ghosts, engaging in what they think is harmless fun, steal 5 magical golden fruit from a sacred tree at the center of Pac Village.
Just trying to cause trouble, as usual.
Exactly.
Yeah.
This seemingly trivial act unwittingly breaks an ancient seal, unleashing Spooky, a powerful and malevolent ghost king who had been imprisoned beneath the tree for centuries. Professor Pac, now established as the resident lore expert, informs Pac-Man of this dire situation, sending him on a sweeping quest across Pac-Land to retrieve the golden fruit and re-imprison the ancient evil before it can consume everything.
This narrative retroactively created a rich, intricate mythology for what was previously a simple cartoon world. It established the existence of primordial evils like spooky, legendary heroes from Pac-Land's past, such as the valiant knight Sir Pac-a-Lot, who first defeated Spooky millennia ago.
Pac-a-Lot. Love it.
It's great, isn't it? And powerful magical artifacts like the golden fruit, which were revealed to have been created by the great wizard Pac to seal away cosmic threats. The game's climax sees Pac-Man harness the immense power of the golden fruit, transforming into a magnificent golden form to finally defeat Spooky, echoing classic heroic sagas where the hero gains ultimate power for the final battle. This act of lore backfilling, as you could call it, gave new weight and historical significance to the simple conflicts of the original game, showing that even seemingly random elements like Pac Dots and Power Pellets could be rooted in a deeper, more ancient cosmic struggle. It demonstrated the franchise's potential for true mythological storytelling.
Then in Pac-Man World 3, 2005, the stakes escalated even further, moving beyond a planetary threat to a full-blown dimensional crisis. The antagonist this time is Irwin, a truly malicious human genius who develops a machine to siphon energy from the spectral realm, which is formally identified as the home dimension of the ghosts. His reckless actions cause the very fabric of reality to destabilize, leading to a catastrophic merger of the spectral realm and Pac-Land that threatens to destroy both dimensions entirely. The crisis begins dramatically on Pac-Man's 25th birthday, another birthday ruined, when he is unexpectedly teleported away by Orson, a ghost who was a former minor antagonist from the first Pac-Man world, but now seeing the universal threat, seeks Pac-Man's help.
Right, Orson flipsides due to the bigger threat. The third game truly expands the cosmology in unprecedented ways, introducing parallel dimensions and forcing an alliance with former enemies. This dimensional collapse and Irwin's desperate machinations lead to an unprecedented situation. With some of the Ghost Gang captured by Irwin, Pac-Man is forced to form an unlikely, uneasy alliance with his longtime nemesis, Pinky and Clyde, who actually become playable characters in this game.
Playable Pinky and Clyde, that's unexpected.
Very. This narrative turn formally named the Ghost's home dimension, the spectral realm, and established a complex, often fragile, symbiotic relationship between the physical and spectral planes of existence. It raises an important question. What does it mean when your longtime antagonists become your only hope for survival? It forces a reevaluation of who the enemy truly is. The game also marked a significant milestone. It was the first time Pac-Man was fully voiced in a main series video game, cementing the heroic, determined personality that had been steadily developing since the Hanna-Barbera era, giving him a distinct voice to match his epic deeds.
After all that epic adventure, those grand quests and dimensional threats, you might think you have Pac-Man figured out. But the franchise likes to keep us on our toes. There was a brief crossover diversion in Pac-Man World Rally 2006. While primarily a non-canonical kart racing spin-off, it serves as a kind of celebratory capstone to the adventure canon. The game's roster brought together the heroes like Pac-Man and Mrs. Pac-Man, and a surprising number of the villains, including the Ghost Gang, Irwin, and Spooky from the entire trilogy, alongside characters from other classic Namco franchises like Dig Dug and Katamari Damacy. It effectively solidified the cast and themes of the Pac-Man World era in a final, fun, non-narrative appearance before the franchise would move in a completely new direction again. The key insight from the adventure canon is how a character can move from abstraction to a fully fleshed-out hero with a deep, expansive mythology, proving that even simple beginnings can spawn epic sagas when given enough creative freedom and the right platform.
Which brings us to perhaps the most drastic reinvention in the franchise's entire history, the reboot canon. The Ghostly Adventures universe, spanning from 2013 to 2015, this period saw the launch of the CGI animated series Pac-Man and the Ghostly Adventures and its associated video games. This new canon is a complete reboot, sharing almost no narrative or set continuity with any previous era. Zero. It was a conscious decision to reimagine the core concepts of the franchise for a new, younger, predominantly preteen audience. Pac-Man was recast not as a simple hero nor as a family man, but as a chosen one with a mysterious destiny, a common and popular trope in modern young adult fiction, reflecting a definite shift in narrative trends.
Just when you thought you had Pac-Man figured out, they hit the reset button entirely. This is where the franchise completely changes gears for a new generation. This new universe is set on the futuristic planet of Pac-World, specifically in the high-tech metropolis of Pacopolis. The protagonist is a teenage high schooler named Pac, often referred to as Paxter, who lives as an orphan and attends Maze High School with his two inseparable best friends, the intelligent pink Pac girl Cylindria and the boisterous red Pac boy Spiral.
The Sand Sparrow, yeah.
The central plot is triggered when Pac, while clumsily fleeing the school bully Skibo, accidentally opens a portal to the Netherworld, unleashing an army of ghosts upon his unsuspecting city. This immediate crisis sets the stage for his destiny to unfold.
This reboot also introduced a completely new origin story for Pac-Man's powers, a true retconned origin story, the last of the Yellow Ones. Now, for anyone unfamiliar with the term, a retcon is basically a retroactive continuity change where something previously established in a story is altered or completely removed to fit a new narrative or, as we'll see later, even a new legal reality. It happens all the time in comics and long-running franchises. In this particular retcon, Pac discovers that he is the last of the Yellow Ones, a legendary, almost mythical race of Pac people who possess the unique innate ability to eat ghosts, an ability no other Pac person now has in this universe.
So eating ghosts isn't normal anymore. Only he can do it.
Exactly. The lore establishes a great war in Pac-World's distant past, during which the tyrannical Lord Betrayus led a revolt. The Yellow Ones were the heroic defenders who fought against him, but they were all tragically wiped out in the conflict, leaving Pac as the sole survivor. A central mystery driving the entire series is the disappearance of Pac's parents, Zack and Sonny, who were Yellow One heroes in that ancient war. This intricate backstory provides Pac with a deep personal motivation, tying his current heroism not just to chance, but framing it as a matter of destiny and inherited legacy, a powerful narrative for a young audience.
And the ghost situation is completely different now, isn't it? It's not just a new setting, but a fundamental shift in their role and who they are. The Netherworld and Lord Betrayus introduce a totally reimagined ghostly conflict. The familiar spectral realm is replaced by the Netherworld, a fiery, somewhat hellish dimension ruled by the series' primary antagonist, Lord Betrayus Sneakerus Spheros.
Quite a name.
Isn't it? In a twist that adds a new layer of political intrigue and familial drama. Betrayus is revealed to be the estranged brother of Pac-World's benevolent leader, President Stratosferos, making their conflict a battle between siblings for control and power. The Ghost's main objective and the driving force behind their repeated invasions is to locate the repository, a hidden chamber on Pac-World that contains their original physical bodies. If they can possess these bodies, they can live again in the physical world, a goal that fuels their relentless attacks on Pacopolis.
Perhaps the most fundamental and frankly shocking narrative inversion in the Ghostly Adventures canon is the transformation of the Ghost Gang into allies instead of foes. The iconic Ghost Gang Blinky, Pinky, Inky, and Clyde are emphatically not Pac-Man's enemies in this universe.
Wait, what? They're friends?
Essentially, yes. They're portrayed as a quartet of friendly, often bumbling ghosts who have defected from Betrays' army. They serve as Pac's secret allies, providing him with vital intelligence and assistance from within the Netherworld, all in the secret hope that he will one day help restore them to life and their physical bodies. This decision was a massive creative risk and required the creation of a new overarching villain in Betrays to serve as the primary antagonist, since the classic foursome were now on Pac's side. The classic power pellets are also completely reimagined and replaced by colorful power berries, which grow on the sacred tree of life. These berries grant Pac a wide variety of elemental and thematic transformations, like Fire Pac, Ice Pac, or Chameleon Pac.
So lots more power-ups.
Loads. It became a central gameplay and narrative mechanic, offering diverse powers for every situation, an evolution from Super Pac-Man but taken much further. This is perhaps the most shocking narrative inversion in the entire franchise, taking the series' core conflict Pac-Man versus the Ghosts and flipping it entirely on its head for a new generation. It completely redefines everything and truly shows how far a franchise will go to reinvent itself, even at the cost of its most fundamental premise. It was bold.
Incredible. Bold is right. It's amazing to see how a core conflict can be completely rewritten for a new audience. Okay, let's move into our final era, the modern and meta lore era from 2007 to the present. This period is characterized by two distinct and fascinating trends. The first is a significant return to the franchise's abstract gameplay-focused roots, where the narrative is truly derived from the mechanics of play itself, harkening back to the original arcade spirit. But the second, and arguably more profound trend, is the undeniable intrusion of real-world corporate and legal issues directly into the game's canon, creating a fascinating new layer of meta lore where the narrative is shaped not by visionary writers or game designers, but quite literally by lawyers and business decisions. This is where the deep dive gets really wild, because the real world starts writing the fictional one. It's not just about gameplay anymore. It's about lawsuits and corporate strategy directly impacting the stories we love.
Let's start with the first trend, the return to the maze. The gameplay-centric lore of Championship Edition. Beginning with Pac-Man Championship Edition in 2007 and its highly acclaimed sequel, Pac-Man Championship Edition DX, in 2010 the franchise pivoted sharply away from narrative-heavy platformers. These titles, overseen by a new generation of designers with Toru Iwatani consulting on the first one, were conceived as modernizations of the pure arcade experience distilled down to its absolute essence. The lore in these games is almost entirely abstract and experiential. The narrative is no longer about a hero on a quest, it's the player's relentless pursuit of a high score within a strict, exhilarating time limit.
So the story is just playing the game well.
In a way, yes. Gameplay elements themselves are the story. Mazes dynamically shift and evolve as the player clears them. New sleeping ghosts awaken to form massive ghost trains that trail behind Pac-Man, offering huge point bonuses when a power pellet is consumed. The game's speed dramatically increases as the player scores, creating a palpable sense of tension and momentum that tells its own story of escalating challenge and, hopefully, mastery. This canon fundamentally redefines Pac-Man not as a character in a pre-written story, but as an avatar in a high-speed competitive digital sport. This represents a powerful statement about video game narrative, that the core experience of play itself can be the most compelling story. The story isn't told to you, it's made by you in real time through your actions and skill.
That's a brilliant way to redefine narrative, making the player's agency the central driving force again. And then there's canonizing the kill screen. The endless chase of Pac-Man 256. For those who might not know, the original 1980 Pac-Man arcade game contained a famous bug. Due to an 8-bit integer overflow in the level counter, the 256th level becomes an unplayable mess of jumbled graphics, notoriously known to players as the kill screen.
Yeah.
It literally broke the game. The 2015 game Pac-Man 256, developed by Hipster Whale, brilliantly transforms this piece of technical trivia, this digital artifact, into a core narrative and gameplay mechanic.
It's such a clever idea.
Isn't it? The game is an endless runner set in an isometric maze where Pac-Man is perpetually fleeing upwards. But he's not just fleeing ghosts, he's pursued from the bottom of the screen by a menacing, ever-advancing wave of corrupting, multicolored static, the very 256 glitch from the original game, made manifest as a terrifying existential threat. Can you imagine a game-breaking bug becoming a character, a villain even? This is where technical glitches become terrifying existential threats in the game's universe. The game breaking down is now part of the story itself, a truly unique form of lore creation where a limitation of the original hardware is canonized as a literal breakdown of reality within the game's universe. The antagonist is not a character, but the very dissolution of the game's world.
And this brings us to perhaps the most impactful and controversial instance of meta lore in Pac-Man's history, the museum and the retcon, the erasure of Miss Pac-Man. This is a change driven not by creative vision or new storytelling opportunities, but directly by complex intellectual property law and corporate strategy. As we discussed earlier, Ms. Pac-Man was originally created by the American company GCC, not by Namco itself. Over the decades, the rights to the character became the subject of a complex and increasingly contentious legal dispute between GCC's successors, particularly a company called At Games, and Namco's modern incarnation, Bandai Namco.
The legal stuff finally bites back.
It really did. This real-world conflict had a direct, profound, and perhaps unsettling in-universe consequence. In the 2022 compilation title, Pac-Man Museum Plus O, the beloved character of Mrs. Pac-Man was systematically removed and replaced in the classic games where she had previously appeared, such as the included version of Pac-Land.
So, after all her history, all her contributions to the lore, they just effectively erased her from the past of these games. What does that even look like in the game? How do they replace her?
Effectively, yes, it's a striking example of a corporate retcon. Her replacement is a new, legally distinct character named Pac-Mom, who sports a pink hat instead of Miss Pac-Man's iconic red bow, and has slightly different features. Similarly, other members of the Pac family that were derived from her lineage were redesigned to sever their visual and legal connection to the now disputed character. Junior Pac-Man became Pac-Boy, and Baby Pac-Man became Paxis in the games featured in that collection.
Pac-Mom, Pac-Boy, Paxis. Wow.
It represents a landmark moment where the official canon of a major beloved franchise was actively rewritten not by a writer in a creative meeting, but to align with the corporation's legal and commercial strategy. The narrative in this specific instance was not authored by a traditional creative team, but by a legal department, making corporate history an inextricable part of the official Pac-Man timeline going forward, at least in these re-releases. This raises an important and provocative question. Who truly owns the narrative? The original creators, the evolving creative teams, or the legal teams and business interests that govern intellectual property? It's a powerful demonstration of how real-world business decisions can directly impact and even rewrite the fictional worlds we cherish. The key takeaway from this modern era is that game narratives are no longer solely the domain of creators. They can be profoundly shaped and even rewritten by the external forces of technology, business, and law.
Wow. Just wow. So we've navigated the Pac-Man multiverse from eating dots in a simple maze to fighting ancient evils, high school bullies, and even seeing our favorite characters disappear due to corporate lawyers. What an incredible, often bizarre journey for a little yellow circle. The 4-decade history of Pac-Man's lore is a remarkable testament to the character's extraordinary adaptability and the ever-evolving nature of storytelling in interactive media. We've seen that there is no single cohesive linear timeline. Instead, the franchise exists as a multiverse of parallel canons, each a valid and fascinating reflection of its time. We started with the foundational era, where the lore was inseparable from the gameplay, a pure abstract narrative of consumption and pursuit. This was followed by the Pac-Land canon, where the commercial necessity of adapting the property for television led to the creation of a tangible world and the transformation of Pac-Man into a heroic protector of his family and home.
And then, the adventure canon of the Pac-Man World saga built upon this heroic archetype, retroactively constructing a deep and epic mythology of ancient evils, legendary heroes, and complex dimensional planes, perfectly suiting the grander scale of 3D platformers. In a stark, almost audacious departure, the reboot canon of Ghostly Adventures completely reimagined the entire universe for a new generation, recasting the hero as a destined chosen one, and, most shockingly, inverting the franchise's most fundamental conflict by making the Ghost Gang his allies.
Still reeling from that one a bit.
Right. Finally, the modern and meta-lore era has brought the narrative full circle in some ways, returning to abstraction by canonizing pure gameplay concepts like the high score and the kill screen, while simultaneously demonstrating how real-world corporate law can become the ultimate author of a fictional universe. It's truly a unique case study in franchise evolution, showcasing unparalleled flexibility, maybe even fragility sometimes.
Despite these wild divergences, these parallel universes, certain thematic pillars endure, don't they? The primal act of consumption, the unwavering importance of family, even if its members change legally, and the eternal chase between Pac-Man and the ghosts remains central, even as their specific forms and motivations shift dramatically from one canon to the next. It profoundly proves that a strong core concept can not only survive, but thrive through endless reinvention.
Absolutely. Ultimately, Pac-Man's lore is not a straight line, but a complex, ever-expanding maze, much like the one its iconic hero first navigated all those years ago.
So next time you see Pac-Man, perhaps in an arcade, on your phone, or even in a cartoon, maybe you'll think about more than just a high score. You might see a living, breathing testament to how stories evolve, adapt, and are even rewritten by the world around them. What does this incredible journey tell us about how all popular culture narratives are shaped, not just by brilliant creative minds, but by the commercial and legal forces that surround them? How much of the stories we love are actually authored by boardrooms and courtrooms, and what does that stand out to you about this incredible deep dive into the Pac-Man multiverse?